Hey everybody, Norm from Tested here.
Jeremy from Tested.
And welcome back to Projections, where we have a special early episode this week. We are reviewing the Oculus Quest.
Oh, it's finally here. We've been toying with prototypes for a couple years now. This is the all-in-one, completely isolated, 6 degrees of freedom VR headset.
Now, a few bits of information up front. This is going to be on sale, pre-order right now if you go to oculus.com, as well as other online retailers.
Best Buy, Amazon.
That's right, and it'll be shipping on May 21st along with the Rift S.
There are two SKUs. There's the $399 SKU at 64 gigabytes, and there's the double that, 128 gigabyte for $499.
That's right. But Oculus provided us with a review unit, and we've been using it for the past week. If you're new to VR and you're curious about the differences between all these headsets, a little bit of a history first.
It's a lot to keep in mind, even for us, because when we started out, there was really just like one thing. There was the PC headsets, and that was basically the Rift and the HTC Vive, and they were very similar. They both had external sensors that you needed to mount throughout your room, and they had the headset and the 6 degrees of freedom controllers.
Yes, which gave you hand presence. We can call that like the first generation of VR headsets. They ran the graphics and the computational power off of your PC. You would be tethered with a long cable, essentially.
And of course, you needed a gaming PC. You needed a gaming graphics card, which start like the whole thing is like $1,500 just to get going in VR.
Because it's rendering not only graphics for one eye, but for two eyes, and at a much higher refresh rate, frame rate than on your normal gaming PC. You needed a 90 hertz refresh rate. Now, since then, Oculus has released the Oculus Go, which is a standalone VR headset. So all of the graphics, all of the computational power is on this device, but it's hampered by the fact that it is a 3 degrees of freedom only device. You can move your head around, turn around, but you can't actually move around.
Right, so you can look in any direction, you just can't move and walk in any direction. Same thing goes for the controller, which you can point in any direction, but doing this does absolutely nothing.
Essentially a laser pointer. And so with the Oculus Quest, it's basically taking the best of both those worlds and putting them in one device. It is all self-contained. You don't need to connect it to a laptop or a desktop. It runs on a Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 mobile processor. And for its tracking, it uses what Facebook Oculus calls Oculus Insight, an inside-out tracking system. There's an array of 4 cameras, wide-angle global shutter cameras on the corners of the headset that look at the world. And not only look at the world, but also look at its controllers.
They've come with the new touch controllers, and these are going to be the same controllers that come with the new Rift S as well, but they're different than the previous touch controllers. The rings now face upward, whereas the old touch controllers, they used to face downward. And they face upward so that the cameras can see them better, because surrounding these are actually invisible to the human eye infrared LEDs that flicker and allow the headset to see them and track them throughout 3D space.
Yes, and so there is a little bit of setup, and when you put on the headset, the first thing you see is a pass-through. It's a grayscale monochromatic view of the world. It's not particularly sharp. It's almost like looking through a fuzzy analog television.
But it is stereo. It's just not perspective correct like it is on the S.
That's right. And it sees the world and allows you then to draw your boundaries.
This setup is far and away better than any of the PC setups that we've done in the past.
Yes.
Right? Because in the traditional PC world, you had to actually walk around your space. On the computer screen, you'd see a representation of your controller, and you'd walk around your space. You'd literally move around your room and draw a box, essentially. Mm-hmm. And then it would isolate like an area within that, and that would be your space. But it was kind of a tedious process. With this, you literally stand in one place, and now that you can see with a pass-through system, you point. You just stand and point and draw your area around you. You can do this within seconds. I mean, it's super, super easy, super fun, and you can actually store 5 different they call them guardian spaces in the headset, and anytime you go back to one of these spaces, theoretically, it will recognize it, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and also knows where your controllers are. Something also does a little bit of augmented reality, at least the barest minimum.
Right.
It highlights your right controller, highlights the left controller, so you're never fumbling to grab the controller, put on the strap, and then put the headset on. You can put the headset on and see, oh, my controllers are right there. They're highlighted. Grab the correct one, put it on your wrist, tighten the straps, and get ready to game. And you mentioned the Guardian system, and the Guardian system is that boundary. It does recognize 5 of them. And in my experience, my house, I mapped as many rooms as I could with the idea that I could go maybe from room to room and have it immediately recognized. And I found the memory to be about 50% accurate.
I had excellent success with the Guardian setup. I set it up in 3 different rooms, and anytime I went back to one of those rooms, it didn't even have to think about it. It just knew immediately that those were the spaces. I wonder if it's a matter of lighting or the amount of contrast that there is in the space,
or things that might be changing. If you move a chair around, you might not know that there's a chair around. Lighting, I think, is a very important thing because these cameras are very sensitive to a certain spectrum of light. For example, that's why they don't work outside. If you're in bright daylight, if you're outdoors, we tried testing this, tried creating a Guardian space, tried tracking on a grassy field. None of it works. The controllers don't work. We have heard reports of people who have done it in a very overcast situation with not a lot of sunlight. And you can technically, if it thinks of it as a large indoor space, yes, but by and large, this is meant to be used indoors.
So, and definitely in a lit area, like you said, you can't use it in a dark space because even though the controllers use infrared LEDs, the rest of the system works with the standard visible light optical system where it needs to be able to see the room.
Yes, and not only see the room, but in a room that's not super reflective. So mirrors or big windows, close your blinds, close your drapes when you're setting this up. And normal room lighting, even slightly lower than normal room lighting, will work, just not in a pitch black room.
So that's most of the stuff we already knew going into it. Should we talk about our experience using it for the past week?
Absolutely, absolutely. And with the Guardian system, one of the big surprises for me was how well it blended with the menu and even game experiences. It's always in the background as a layer that's run. And not only that boundary, I may be in the Oculus menu, which in this case is better than the Go menu because I can actually walk around a little bit, I can drag the menus toward me, but if I move beyond my Guardian space, the Guardian fades in. It's almost like the holodeck grid wall.
The holodeck grid wall fades in when you get close to it, either your controller or your headset. And if you then start to pass through it, this cool circle opens up around your head or hands and you can pass through it. And if you pass your head through it, it's very clever because it then fades in the pass-through system so you can actually see what it is you're about to knock your head into.
Yes, and that works in all the content. It's always running. It never broke for me, and it just added a level of comfort and security when using this in any of the environments. You can also use it standing. There's in the menu system. You can click that I'm in a seated or standing non-room scale environment, and then it'll create a Guardian that's more just like a cone around you, and it doesn't take up one of those 5 memory slots. And that's great for games where you don't want to be walking around.
You can even go into the menus into a developer menu and turn off Guardian completely, in which case you have to agree to the terms and conditions. You're at your own risk, but you can do that as well if you really just want to sit down and do it in a space that is very, very temporary.
Now, what's also cool about this headset is that even though all the processing power is on the mobile device, it actually is one of the better displays and visual experiences that we've seen in VR because it has a really high resolution display.
1600 by 1440.
For each eye. And which is equivalent to like the Vive Pro.
It is, and it's an OLED display, so you get really, really deep blacks. Every single pixel is its own light source. It is a pentile display. It's not the same thing as an RGB stripe, and the VR nerds will know the difference between them, but just rest assured it is a very high resolution display that is superior to the original Oculus Rift.
That's right. And the field of view is, I think, comparable to what you'd see in the Go and the Rift, which is to say, I could use a little bit more FOV, but it's good enough. It's basically you have experience parity between all these devices. It is running at 72 hertz, and in our experience, 72 hertz was good enough. Like I wasn't clamoring for 90 or even more. I would rather take consistent frame rate because it is a mobile processor.
We were used to that on the Go, although we didn't have the experience of being able to move through the space. I would say 72 is certainly good enough for Beat Saber, for Space Pirate Trainer, for some fast-paced experiences that we got to try. It's definitely good enough, and I didn't find myself getting motion sickness due to any limitation of the headset.
And comfort-wise, it is really comfortable. It's actually much better than the Oculus Go. It's not quite a fully rigid head strap, so the back here, what cups the back of your head, is still kind of rubber plastic. But it does have the stiff side arms here, which is inherited from the Rift.
Definitely more rigid. And I definitely like this spring action. So you can put it on sort of like a spring-loaded cap.
It doesn't fold all the way up like the Go does, so it just does that 45-degree angle, so you can put it on. And the recommendation for full comfort, because it is a little heavier than the Oculus Go, is to make sure that you cup this around the back of your head completely and tighten the straps.
We measured it at 590 grams,
yeah.
Which is actually a little lighter than I expected it to be. You said it was very comfortable. I spent several hours in the unit, and I would say after about a half hour, I felt it to be a little bit front heavy. And it felt like I got a lot of relief just from lifting it for a little bit. Yeah. I wish it was just a little bit lighter, but there is so much compacted into this headset, I have to forgive it.
I mean, one of the very first prototypes that we saw of the Quest, before it wasn't called the Quest, it was called the Santa Cruz prototype. 2-3 years ago, they had the processing in the back, and I wonder if they'd experimented with different ergonomics to put maybe some of the battery or some of that compute in the back to redistribute the weight, but I think clearly they wanted everything in the front here so that this can compact and it'd be easier to move around.
The Oculus Rift has integrated audio in the form of headphones that come off the side, and you can do like this to give yourself some room or pop them down in your ears, and they isolate the rest of the world relatively well. With the Go, they went with an internal system with this sound that gets piped back along the strap. And they did a very similar system with the Quest. How did you find the audio?
I found it very comparable to Go, meaning that I got spatial audio. Games that make use of spatial audio, like Beat Saber, it sounds like the sound is coming from that direction, but it also sounds like the sound is being piped. You can kind of tell that the speakers are right in front of you, pushing toward your ear, and it doesn't have great bass response.
That's it. Like, there's really very little low end, and that's the one thing that I miss from the Rift. However, like the alternative of just having a headphone jack, this is so far superior. Like, you need to have integrated audio because you're going to be passing this around. You're not going to want to deal with headphones all the time. And it honestly, I think it sounds better than the Go. There were times when sounds would come out of games, and I thought, oh, someone else is in the room. Like, it really does a good job of that spatial positioning.
It's interesting because it also does have 2 analog headphone jacks, and Oculus will be selling for $50 their own solution for in-ear headphones as an accessory for the Quest that plug into both the left and right side. So
interesting choice to use both jacks for that reason. So they're both stereo jacks. You can plug an actual headphone into either one, but their system uses one for each, a left and a right.
The facial interface is removable, so you can pull this out and clean it. And what's interesting here is that there is, I have actually plugged in right here, they include a intermediate spacer that you can use
for
glasses. Same
thing with the Go.
Yeah, so for me, I use glasses and I have pretty big glasses. The spacer worked well for me, decreases the field of vision just a little bit, but I would rather have that than the lack of comfort.
It does have an IPD adjustment, physical IPD adjustment.
On the bottom right there.
Which is unlike the new Oculus S. So this is actually a headset that maybe can support smaller IPDs than even their PC solution at this point in time. It probably supports somewhere in the high 50s to the low 70s in terms of millimeters between your pupils.
What's interesting though, maybe this is because the software isn't updated yet, is when you adjust the IPD, I don't see an on-screen indication of the number. So you kind of just have to adjust it to where you find it most comfortable. Unlike other headsets, if you know your IPD, you adjust it to your number specifically. Also, because there's internal IPD adjustment, you have the same kind of mesh interface on the inside here that you do on the Rift. And what that means is you can't pop out the lens covers here for the same type of interchangeable prescription lenses that you have on the Go. This is just fixed right here.
I wonder if there will be a third party that offers that eventually that snaps in somehow.
Yeah, somehow.
Well, how about the controllers?
Oh yeah, the controllers, yes.
So like we said, these now face upward instead of downward. And the system tells you which is which in case you get a little bit confused. You do have to use the left in the left hand and the right in the right hand because of the internal trigger and the position of the analog sticks are kind of mirrored. I found it to be perfectly functional. Once you're in game, it works great. However, actually getting it on your hand, it's a little top heavy. It's not as bottom heavy as these, so the natural, way that it falls isn't in line with gravity. So it's like you have to sort of keep it upright.
Yeah, I had to remind myself constantly that the rings were on top and not bottom.
Right.
And maybe it's after years of using the touch controllers on the Rift, I'm still getting used to them.
Me too. And another thing to note is that the battery slider is now on the top. The battery slider, like the original touch controllers, is magnetically held in place, and it takes one AA battery, which is actually, by the way, a great solution because if you run out of power, you just pop another AA, you don't have to charge it. But this goes back on, snaps into position, and I found myself in some more intense experiences moving this off while I played.
Yeah.
Did you not find that?
I didn't find that. When you did that, did it take the battery out? Or?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. It's just it takes me out of the game for a moment, and I have to remember not to squeeze it too hard so that I pull it back.
Yeah, and some people, because there's both a menu button and an Oculus button on these, accidentally hit those buttons. There is now a setting in the menu to make those long presses. It does replace the reset orientation, but if you're the type of person that accidentally hits those because you're getting used to the new ergonomics, then you can turn that on in the menu.
One last point for clarity, there has been some confusion over whether or not the new controllers are compatible with the original Rift, and it is not compatible. Oculus will continue to support the original touch controllers for owners of that device.
Yes, but they are interchangeable. You can pair them if you have a Rift S. They're essentially the same controller, and just like with the Go, you can pair a Bluetooth controller if you want to use a gamepad, for example, on the Quest, although in our testing, we couldn't get a wired gamepad to work over USB-C.
I hooked up an on-the-go adapter and a wired gamepad to it, and it made a sound. It recognized a device, but it didn't work in the menus like it does in the Go.
Yeah.
So I just hope that a wired gamepad solution on-the-go adapter will work in the future. Particularly because that's how I would play my pinball games if they release a pinball game.
And also, it is USB-C, which is much improved over the USB mini connection.
In terms of data transfer rate.
Data transfer rate, they also include a 10-foot long cable, which is really nice, with a L-mounted C adapter here. So that makes charging really easy. The battery inside, they claim about 2 to 3 hours of use time, which is going to depend on what type of experiences you're doing.
I definitely ran it all the way down playing Journey of the Gods, which is probably a 5-hour experience. And I found that you can plug it in and play at the same time. Now this is something they don't recommend, probably just because it's not ideal. And they didn't recommend it on the Go, but it worked there as well. But it does work fine. It charges at 5 volts at 1.2 amps. So if you have a battery pack that can deliver that, it will do it over USB-C.
But it's not using the full potential of the current of the USB-C.
No, they could have been doing 9 volts, done a faster charge. For whatever reason, they're charging at the pretty standard rate.
Yeah, I expect a lot of people to be adapting their headsets with battery packs, which I think is totally fine.
Or wearing it on your
hip
using a cable.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the games then.
Please.
Yes, so this is when it launches on May 21st. There'll be about 50 games available. These are games made by developers that have partnered with Oculus to go through their approval process. Much like on the Go, they're talking about it being more curated experience with a focus on games specifically. We were able to play about 15 of the games before launch, which range from some ports of existing VR titles like Superhot and Creed and Space Pirate Trainer to games that were specifically made for the Quest, like Sports Scramble, VR Sports Scramble, and Face Your Fears 2. And I think experience-wise, parity with the Rift, like positional tracking in these games works with hand presence.
And not just the positional tracking, which is absolutely great. I mean, Carmack tweeted at one point that he was refining the positional tracking of the controllers using Beat Saber because he wanted it to play better on the Quest than it does on the PC. So you're right. The actual tracking of the world and the controllers, I would say, is as good as the PC experience.
And definitely better than any of the previous mobile inside-out tracking experiences we've tried before.
Absolutely. But the graphics are what surprised me even more. I mean, we've used prototypes of this. I was ready for the tracking to be good. But the graphics, honestly, I had tempered my hopes. I thought it might be more of an Oculus Go kind of thing because even though it has a faster processor, it also has to do all of the inside-out tracking using that exact same processor. There's no sub-processor for all that stuff. So I was expecting Oculus Go level geometry, textures, and honestly, the PC ports that we saw were very, very close to their PC equivalents.
I mean, with the graphics turned down on the PC. For like Space Pirate Trainer, for example, it plays exactly like Space Pirate Trainer does on the PC. You don't get a lot of the post-processing effects. If on the PC version, you basically take away a lot of those effects, that's the version you get on the Quest.
But like with Superhot, could you really tell?
I couldn't tell.
I mean,
I think it's about graphical styling.
It is very much about graphical styling, but it's also been, I think there's been this 6-month period of optimizations that developers have put in, and they're learning how to get the most out of this processor. Because the sky's the limit on a PC. But with this, they really have to temper things back. They have to lower the number of draw calls. They have to combine effects into a single effect and use textures instead of post-processes. All this stuff, they're learning how to do that, and I'm very impressed with what the first generation of products are able to pull out of this processor.
When running at a higher resolution,
it's just going to get better.
Absolutely, and I think developers are going to attune their styles to optimize for what the Quest can do. I think less reliant on graphics that have textures that try to emulate the real-world materials, like concrete, steel, high detail textures, and more colorful games. I can't wait to play Rec Room on this, because I think that's going to look great. A game like the tennis sports scramble was, I think, it looked really good. One of the best looking games in the Quest, and you'd be hard pressed to have me decide if that was a PC game or a mobile game, because it was just a VR game.
Right. Now, we haven't played Rec Room yet. That is supposed to be slated for launch. We have not been given access to that. I'll be very curious about what that looks like. But there's also games like Racket NX, which also we haven't gotten a chance to play. But that's a game that is going to benefit so much from having no tether, because you can spin around and play basically racquetball in a 360-degree sphere, and you'll come out of it not knowing what direction you're facing.
Yeah, we played a bunch of Oculus Go games that were ports of Rift games and tried to make it work for 3 degrees of freedom,
right.
Like a table tennis game. Once you have that same game on Quest, playing a ping pong game in Quest was so fun.
Well, compared to Go?
Even compared to Rift, because
Sure.
I didn't feel the cord on my shoulder. I felt like I could actually jump around, move around. The space that you can set up the Guardian for, it does have a cap on how big you can set up that space.
Right.
We figured with our testing about 15 feet by 15 feet, or about a little over 200 square foot. If you draw a circle, it does stop you.
Which is not quite the arena scale that they pitched this as.
It's not full arena scale,
right?
It is room scale.
Yeah.
But in that room, very liberating.
That makes me wonder, how did they pull off the multiplayer Dead and Buried experience that we played at Oculus Connect, which was what was it, 3v3?
Yeah.
It's basically a location-based experience using only the Quest. So that was definitely some custom code
tracking
from the ground up in order to make that work.
Sure.
But that is possible.
It's technically possible. Yeah. I wonder if it's because for safety, or they're just not ready yet, or because that pass-through layer is always running in the background.
Right.
It's not sure.
When you do hit the limit of your Guardian system, it just doesn't let you draw any further out.
Yeah.
So that's how you find out what that limit is. But the shapes, by the way, can be any shape. I mean, it can be a crazy shape that goes around your furniture.
Now, back to the games. Beat Saber, super solid. I think if you like Beat Saber, you're going to be happy with Beat Saber on here.
Totally.
You played through Journey of the Gods, which is
I'm a big fan. This was a game that evolves in terms of what you do as a player, what you do in VR, and what you're capable of. You play as a god who's also capable of switching between human form and fighting into melee and range-style combat. And it's Nate Mitchell at one point compared it to a Zelda-like experience. It's a great game. The audio is surprisingly good, and I'm excited for that to come out on both platforms, because I think that's going to be one of the great launch titles for this, especially given that it's also a new title.
Yeah. Other ports, I played Creed, which is a boxing game, and when I'm into it, having untethered mobile VR, being able to kind of dance around, that was really fun, but also show me a little bit of the limitations of the tracking for this, because the places where the controllers don't track so well are one behind you and also very close in front of you. And anyone can test this, just even in that Guardian pass-through setup. If you move a controller right up to your head, which I'm doing when I'm playing Creed, because I'm holding my hands up
right to
boxing, then I lose tracking, and so maybe boxing doesn't work well.
Space Pirate Trainer is another game that requires you to switch weapons by reaching over your shoulder.
Yeah.
Right. And this is an area where these cameras can't perceive. And the theory is you can continue to use the IMU inside the controllers to track beyond the actual physical or optical sphere that this can see.
They do some modeling, some inference.
And to a certain extent, they do that. And if you reach your hand back very quickly, you can switch weapons. But if you reach back very slowly, it doesn't work. So that's an instance where there is a limitation, but you just learn how to play past it. And certainly the compromises are worth it.
Yeah, and after surveying the preview of games they've enabled for this this review unit, I do feel like that the caliber of games are great on the Quest, but they're not going to be the same level as the full-blown PC games we've seen for the Rift, some of which are still being developed by Oculus Studios.
Do you feel like that's in terms of the graphical fidelity and the complexity of the geometry, that kind of thing, or is it a matter of time spent in the device?
I think both. I think there's going to be a sweet spot for number of hours spent in here. I was doing, about 20 to 30-minute experiences, which isn't to say you couldn't be in this for, an hour or 2 hours, but there's going to be some constraints. Even games like shooters like Apex Construct or Journey of the Gods, these are 4 to 5 hour games, or it may be a game like Beat Saber where it's one mechanic that you have multiple levels on. That type of arcade experience is what I'm expecting more of. Maybe more akin to the mobile experience, and that might be the dividing line.
I wonder, Rec Room, we spent 3 hours just going through a quest, you and me and Kirsch many times. So I'll be curious to see what the battery life is like on this after many, many uses. As well as the comfort level. I do wonder if there's a way to retrofit this strap to relieve some of that front weight. I might see what I can tinker with to do that.
Yeah, with that USB port, you can also move your own media files over, just like you could with the Go. And if you enable a developer mode, you can also sideload your own content if you are a developer as well.
Just like you could on the Oculus Go. But that's, again, that is the advanced user way to get titles on here that Oculus would probably never carry in their store. Things like, like a Virtual Boy emulator or something like that.
Right. And also, it does not work as a PC-tethered headset. I know some people are wondering, could you plug this in and use the display, use the optics, which are great, and with the old tracking system, with PC render games, no, this all is self-contained.
Yeah, John Carmack has said that they are experimenting with that, but no promises. I would be shocked if this actually ever comes to fruition. That is something that they have never spoken about, never promised. Consider this an all-in-one device. This is not a PC connection device. And
for something that's an all-in-one device, that's a mobile device running on a mobile processor, I think my big takeaway is that I was surprised at how few compromises, almost no compromises. Yes, there are going to be some technical limitations. It has to run on a battery. Yeah, it's not going to run graphics to the fullest, but the display looks fantastic. The optics look fantastic. The tracking is rock solid. And for that price, for $400 for this, I think it's a no-brainer for me to pick it up.
I'm going to buy two because this is the first headset where I don't need to invest, in a $1,000 PC in order to have a multiplayer experience in my same house. So I want to play with my family. This is going to be a lot of fun to do things like Rec Room Quest together in the same room. Yeah. I think that's going to be a revolutionary device in that sense. It is $400. Now, to be fair, that is not a fair price point to the competition. This is Facebook accelerating the adoption of VR by subsidizing, essentially, and selling these at very little margin. That's something that the competitors can't necessarily do, but we as consumers take advantage of that at this point, and this is a device that probably should not exist at this price.
And for consumers, you also have to make the purchasing decision, am I buying this device as a game console versus something like a PlayStation or even a Nintendo Switch, which is cheaper, and I think the quality of experiences overall, probably there's more robustness on the other platforms, but those aren't VR. What you're getting for this is a whole different type of experience. If you've never tried VR, don't balk the fact that this is more expensive than Nintendo Switch. You got to try VR and try getting hand presence because it really takes your VR gaming experiences to a whole new level.
Yeah, I wonder if people think that who have tried the Oculus Go, because it is available at that small price point, if they've tried that and they think, well, that's VR and this is maybe a better version of the Go, I would say this is something completely different. This is going to, if you've ever felt motion sickness in the Go, try this, because now moving through space is a completely different level of immersion and comfort. They rest on one another's shoulders, and it's a wonderful experience to be immersed in the space, and especially being able to see both of your hands and interact with the world it's a different level than what is basically the best version of Google Cardboard.
Yeah, 2019 is a very, very exciting year for virtual reality. We have stuff coming out on the very high end from Valve, the Valve Index. Oculus has the Quest and also the Rift S, which we'll be reviewing later on this week. And in the coming weeks, we'll be reviewing the games, showcasing more of the games as we get closer to May 21st on the Quest to really get a bigger sampling of the type of experiences we can get with mobile 6th degree of freedom VR. But this is, like we said, available for pre-order now. It will ship on May 21st. If you have other questions about the headset, please post them in the comments below. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.